I now just accept a lot of who I am. I don't feel as stressed about needing to be this or needing to be that, or how do I fit, or do I fit in or don't I fit in? Am I attractive? Am I not attractive? Am I intelligent? Am I not intelligent? Do I believe this? Do I believe that? It's no, I'm just me. I'm just this mashup of all these life experiences. Some of them are terrible and awful, and I wouldn't repeat them, and others are really good. And I've learned from all of them, and I just kind of accept this is just me now. This is who I am. Yeah. And that takes a lot of stress.
I think that's so beautiful because you're saying, like you initially you feel there's so many part of you, which one is you, but then you realize that they all are you. Thank you so much for coming.
That's all right, Ivan. It's a pleasure.
I really just want to say, like for people, I think most people know who you are.
I don't know, D-grade celebrity status.
Shaun Robinson, CEO of
Mental Health Foundation.
Yeah. I'm very honored, to be honest, like to have you as a guest.
No, it's a pleasure's all mine. I really admire what you've been doing all these years, Ivan. So, we're just fellow travelers on the same journey.
I always felt drawn to talk to you because first you have a very interesting career. What I really like to know is who Shaun Robinson is.
Well, it's an interesting question, who Shaun Robinson is. I mean, I'm 63. I'm probably still figuring that out. It changes, like you go through different phases and stages in your life. I think there are probably two bits of my life that have been the most important to me, especially in the last sort of 25 years or so. And that's my children and my career, and it's been an interesting one because, for example, when I split up with the mother of my children, we were living in the Hawke's Bay, and a couple of years later, I kind of had to make a choice as to whether to stay in the Hawke's Bay and do a job that I probably wouldn't have felt very fulfilled about, or come to Auckland and get a job that I would have found much more rewarding. And it was a interesting choice because obviously if I stayed in the Hawke's Bay, I would have been around my children a lot more. But I kind of decided that I would just not be a happy person or a good parent if I was not, doing something that I found fulfilling in terms of a job. Yeah, but the way I kind of managed that is for the first 2 years, I went back to the Hawke's Bay every weekend. And then for a number of years after that, it was kind of like every second weekend. In the last few years, my kids are now 20 and 24. So my daughter lives in Wellington. My son actually still lives in the Hawke's Bay. But I don't go as often because when I'm there, it's kind of like, hi, Dad, I'm going out. Yeah. Both of those things have been really important to me. And it was an interesting challenge to sort of like go, no, actually, work is sufficiently important to me that I have to do that. Otherwise, I don't feel like I could be the person that I want to be for my kids. And I think it's worked out pretty well. So I suppose that's two sides of me. One is I'm quite achievement oriented, and the other is I'm quite a nurturer as well. So those have been two quite key things. And I guess some of that comes from my parents, actually. My dad was a very achievement oriented and career oriented. And my mum was extremely nurturing. So I guess I just kind of reflect both of those kind of influences.
I think it's really great that you acknowledge both. I mean, that's because as a man in society in general, almost like you either have one or another, especially I think after the separation. And the first question like you ask yourself is, how can I make myself happy so that you can be a better parent without compromising the gift that you can give it to your children as well, so you can be fully present and fully who you are.
Yeah, it's true. And I think back on, I made quite a conscious decision that there are some things about my father that I wanted to replicate. And there were some things about my father's way of being in the world that I didn't want to replicate. Same with my mother too. But yeah, I definitely didn't want to just be that father that was all about work and all of those things. So, and I think I get a huge amount of joy out of my children. I get a huge amount of joy out of all kinds of relationships, but especially my children, where sort of loving them and nurturing them and supporting them is actually very good for me too, as a human being. You know, there's heaps of the 5 ways to well-being in that. You
Yes,
know, there's
that's right.
connecting with them, there's giving to them, there's being there. You know, it's nothing like kids to sort of be there in the moment, really, especially when they're young. I learn from them, you know, I learn from my children all the time, really. My son's a very science-oriented guy, and that's not my kind of field, but I really enjoy talking to him because I learn stuff from him, and he learns stuff from me, you know. And then my daughter she's very creative and artistic. And I mean, I learn about young people's world by being with
Absolutely.
them, all of those things.
I want to say though, it sounds easier at the time, like, oh, I just do something I like, and then,
Yeah.
that must be a lot of sacrifice first, and also commit.
But certainly it has made for a somewhat complicated life
Yeah.
because I've sort of had my life in two places,
Yeah.
in Auckland and in the Hawke's Bay. And it's interesting. And that, again, that has been a commitment. It's taken quite a lot of energy. I've been lucky that I've been able to do it. You know, I've been lucky that I've been able to have jobs that paid well enough that I could do that. But yeah, it has taken time, energy, money. Uh, and at different times, it's felt like a pain, a burden, but most of the time, it's actually been really positive and the best of both worlds. I think in the beginning, most of my life was in the Hawke's Bay with my kids and my family there. And then because I've been doing this now for 15 years. So now most of my life is in Auckland. And it's really only the time I spend with my children in the Hawke's Bay that is the only strong connection I have there. So that shifted over the 15 years. And I mean, they're not children anymore. They're young people and they've got their own lives. And it's that interesting thing where they still want and need quite a lot of support.
Yes.
They like to be able to talk things over. They like some guidance. I'm still supporting my daughter financially while she studies, all of those kinds of things. But equally, they're pretty independent and they like to be independent as well. So, yeah, it's all stages, really, stages of my development and their development. So, yeah, my children are definitely a big part of who I am, for sure.
So the career, which is you talk about, like, finding something that, you feel fulfilling and also with a purpose, it sounds like.
Yeah, totally. I've been lucky enough to do quite a few things in my life, but all kind of relate around a theme really of trying to do something positive for the community. I've been a youth worker, sort of community worker, and sort of gravitated into kind of being a manager or coordinator or leader in services, and then gravitated into kind of peak body type stuff, sort of like networks of services and being the kind of link between services and government. So in a way, I guess being a lobbyist or commentator on what's going on in government. And then from that, I spent some time working in Helen Clark's office back in the 1990s as a policy advisor,
That's right.
which was really interesting. I was kind of thinking, oh, maybe I want to be a politician. And then within about 2 days, I thought, no, never, never. And yeah, it was an interesting thing to sort of see politics from the inside.
Wow.
I like to joke that, with the support of my friends in long-term therapy, I've got over it. Yeah, it's pretty, it's pretty interesting just to see how politics actually does work.
Yeah.
But I definitely, then it didn't take me too long to sort of
Mm,
decide that actually just working on policy and in the political environment just wasn't doing it for me. It's like, um, I get a lot of energy out of being sort of closer to the community.
mm.
So the best work I did while I was in there was when they would just let me go out on the road and
Wow.
I'd go and talk to a whole lot of
Yes.
NGOs and communities and I'd
Wow.
come back and go, right, I think this is what the policy should be.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, so that was, and that just really reminded me I get more energy by being closer to the
Yeah.
community.
I just realized that I
Mm.
probably should have asked you. So where were your hometown? Like, or
I was born down in the South Island in a
yes.
little town called Geraldine. My father was a Presbyterian minister,
Oh,
so tend to move every 7 years or so. So I was spent my first 7 years down in Geraldine in South Canterbury, and then moved to Tairāwhiti, Gisborne for another 7 years. So that's kind of more where I identify
mm,
with. So, East Coast, beaches, hot, big Māori population.
wow.
That's kind of, yeah, that's kind of what I grew up in. And then we moved to Wellington, I guess, when I was in my mid
Mm,
teens. And yeah, that was another big change. And Wellington's not really a big city, but it felt like a big city. And yeah, that was I kind of enjoyed the sort of broader range of
mm,
thinking and things that I discovered there as a young man. I spent quite a long time there, did my first degree there. The one thing about Wellington, and I do love Wellington, but for visits, I could not stand the weather.
I hear you.
And after living in
Yeah.
Gisborne and
Yeah.
Tairāwhiti, which
Yeah.
is kind of like, hot and sunny, it's, going to Wellington where they have unofficially a hurricane every month,
Mm.
that was pretty hard. So, yeah, but that's kind of my background. Those are kind of, I guess, the three key places that I grew up.
Because the reason why I'm asking it, it's, like, when people say they're passionate about community, I think quite
Mm.
often the first question is like, oh, how do you even start having that passion? Because from what you say, it sounds like actually quite just from your father as well, like
Yeah.
experience that he had.
Yeah, no, it definitely a lot of it came from my family. Like my family were Christian
Mm,
and there was a strong sort of Christian social justice
mm,
stream to my parents' kind of view. I mean, they were quite socially conservative in some areas,
mm,
but they were quite, they were quite social justice oriented.
mm,
And my mum came from a working class
mm,
sort of background. And yeah, my dad was middle class. Yeah, so I sort of picked up a lot of values there. And um, I think one of the key things they taught me, which was
mm,
really good, was to put myself in someone else's shoes,
wow.
sort of like,
Mm,
rather than judge, kind of think, well, what's life like for that
mm,
person or those people that you're sort of thinking about? And I think that really, yeah, that was quite
mm,
formative for me. So I think that really drove things a lot.
mm,
In terms of who I am, also, I think coming from that background too, it was quite sheltered in a way,
mm,
and
mm,
so when I became a young person and went out into the world, went to university for the first time, I was a little bit like at sea, really. My parents were very, don't have sex till you're
mm.
married, drinking and drugs are bad, all of these kinds of things. And as a young person, I was kind of like, but all my friends seem to be doing it and they're having a lot of fun.
It's a reality during that time,
Yeah,
especially when you have a father who's a minister.
yeah, yeah.
It's not just about what they say. Also, you have to think about if something goes wrong, and then your
Mm.
father.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah,
totally, totally.
yeah,
So yeah, I kind of flipped when I got
yeah,
to university and sort of rebelled quite heavily.
yeah.
I didn't feel very confident, and I
Mm,
think
mm,
that was the early stages. Like a lot of people, I think I started to really identify my own mental health challenges
mm,
around that time. I started to experience some quite bad depression, in my late teens and early 20s. Started to have real trouble with sleep. That was that was one of the kind of symptoms that I faced. And I think, I've been pondering, so I've got a bipolar diagnosis, which I didn't really get that till I was in my late 30s. So went for a long time sort of not really understanding what
Yes.
was going on.
It's not even talking about at the time.
No,
Yeah.
no one really talked about mental
No.
health
Yeah,
at
exactly.
all. But looking back now, I often wonder whether the stress that I put on myself of, I guess, just trying to figure out, sort of like the Christian values from my
That's right.
family,
Yeah.
with the values of the 70s in New Zealand,
That's
which were
right.
pretty
Yeah.
kind of, youth culture and a lot of, which I found, a lot of that I found really attractive. So I think there was a tension there between the values of my family and the kind of the things that were going on around me and my peers, who kind of sometimes looked at me like, what's going on? Why aren't you smoking dope and having sex?
Live a little bit.
Yeah, live a little bit, and then also even the social justice stuff. There was quite a lot of. I was quite intense, I think, and I ended up in Australia. Yeah, I went traveling after I did my first degree, and that was an interesting time too because I was going to go to Europe like every other Kiwi doing their OE, but I got talked into sort of going through Southeast Asia and up through India, and I actually never made it to Europe because I found that such an amazing experience and spent all my money traveling through Southeast Asia and India and got as far north as Nepal.
Wow.
And that was a really formative thing for me because it was the first time I'd ever been in, because New Zealand is basically a Western culture. I'd had some glimpses of Te Ao Māori, through some of my experiences when I grew up in Gisborne, but I didn't really fully understand it, It was kind of like, well, that's weird. People are living a bit differently. I don't quite understand it.
Yeah.
But then I went to Asia and it was like, oh, I'm in a country where everybody is living differently to what I grew up.
Yes.
And yeah, that was exciting, challenging. At times it was pretty confronting.
Yeah.
And I think I guess I saw the uneven development of the world. I saw, the degree of poverty that existed very openly in a lot of those countries. And
That's amazing, I have to say, especially during that time, it's not so well developed for many South Asia countries. So you're really seeing a witness, the problems of the poor, and also kind of this disparity of the society where there's a two extreme. Like what you say, I really like you sharing your own experience, and despite you reflecting back, like there was years ago, but as a matter of fact, many teenager and young people still facing exactly.
Totally. Figuring out who you are, what your values are, what you're possibly going to do in the world. I mean, when I finished my first degree, people were going, I studied English literature because it was my favorite subject at school, and people were going, oh, what are you going to do with that? What job are you going to get? And that was the last thing on my mind. I wasn't thinking about a job. I was going to university because that was expected of me. So once I'd done that, my parents would be off my back and then I could decide what I was going to do with my life. And the main thing I wanted to do was go overseas and travel because I'd had a whole bunch of cousins who are a lot older than me and they'd have always been somewhere exotic in the world when I was growing up. So I just worked for 6 months in a bar and then took off and and it was great. I think it really, I didn't have anybody else around me. Like I went on my own and so it was kind of like me and the world and I just had to figure myself out and figure the world out. And it was bloody hard. I mean, I think that was another really stressful situation. And
There's no Google Map. There's no
no,
apps that you can There's nothing as such, like
No, there was no internet when I
no
did it.
internet.
No internet. You were sending postcards home. And that was it.
Yeah.
And looking for a letter at post restant. And yeah, I remember when I finally finished traveling through Southeast Asia, I dropped down into Australia, into Darwin, and I didn't even know very much about Australia. Not a lot
Wow.
of Kiwis didn't really. We knew
Wow.
Sydney, and that was about it. So I went to Darwin because on the map it was the closest city, and I didn't realize it was also this incredibly isolated city with the most bizarre kind of, it was like the Wild West, really, extreme poverty, extreme
Wow.
racism, all kinds of, it was really another
Yeah.
very confronting thing. But I do remember quite hilariously, I arrived there and I was
Yeah.
staying in a boarding house. And the very first night I was there, I watched television. It was the first time I'd watched television for about 6 months. And the ridiculousness of ads just struck me in the face, like they're selling a car and they've got a woman in a bikini lying on it, what the, and I was just cracking up
Oh
every
my
time the
God.
ads came on. Everybody in the con rooms looking at me like, what's he on, So yeah, that was very formative, and it kind of yeah.
But that's a fascinating thing. You just say something that I just realized, like you grow in a very structured environment, and it sounds like everything kind of it's very safe and secure. But on the other hand, you have decided to do something just like you don't even know what's going to happen.
Yeah. No, I think have been, probably at times unwisely, I've been a person that's just kind of thrown themselves into something, and it's like, let's see what happens.
Yeah,
Um,
but that's also courage.
Oh, it is courageous. Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess it is courageous. Sometimes it's stupidity. It's not knowing. I think if I'd known, I probably wouldn't have done it.
yeah,
But yeah, it did really form me. So
yeah,
by the end of that time in Southeast Asia, I had really confirmed, I
yeah,
suppose, that, what I want to do with my life. I want to
yeah.
try and make the world a bit better.
Wow.
Sounds really cliched, but I did.
No,
I
not
thought,
at all.
yeah,
Yeah,
I thought,
yeah. Wow.
whatever talents and energy I've got,
Yes.
I want to try and put it towards something that's going to make the world a bit better.
Wow. Because I want to acknowledge, like in order to do what you do means that you also have to have certain degree of willingness to be vulnerable completely. What you just described, like going to countries where at the time they don't even have Wi-Fi and whatsoever. But you say, let's just see what I learned from here. And not many people willing, especially men, to be vulnerable to that degree and say, I let go of all the control I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, look, I did notice people when I was traveling. Actually, there was three Kiwi guys traveling around, and whenever they were around, I pretended I was Australian because I just didn't want to be associated with them. Some people, when they go into that environment, they embrace it,
yes. Yes.
and other people just totally, it was really obvious to me these guys were totally threatened by everything. And so they were just obnoxious. They were just,
Mm.
they were just abusive to the
Wow.
cultures around them.
Wow.
And yeah, and I just thought, I don't want to be like that. In fact, there was quite a lot of, I grew up in a time when I think male role models in New Zealand were pretty toxic.
That's right.
There was a
Yeah.
lot of violence, there was a lot of abusiveness, sort
Mm.
of misogyny,
Mm.
the attitudes to women were pretty gross, homophobia, and just really intolerance of
Wow.
anything different, and kind of like you
Wow.
had to be in this mold. And I never was in that mold. I couldn't
Mm.
I couldn't do it,
Mm.
like partly also, my family, my father, another thing about my family culture is my father was quite severely disabled,
Mm.
physically disabled. So we were not a sporting
Mm.
family at all. So that was a big part of
Mm.
New Zealand male identity that I wasn't part
Mm.
of. So yeah, I always felt quite other,
Mm.
but also I just didn't want to be that sort of person. I just sort of looked at how a lot of men behave and I thought, I don't want to be like that. That's horrible. So, but then of course you have to figure out, well, what sort of person as a man do I want to be? Who am I? What am I like?
Can I just jump
Mm,
in quickly? I think
mm.
that's why you're so good at your job is because you bring the heart and the brain together.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you do understand that human elements of challenges, but yet you still have that policy oversight and bring that both together is the hardest thing actually.
Thank you. Yeah. No, well, like I like to, there's still the achievement
Yeah,
junkie part of me. I like to see things happen,
yeah,
but yeah, hopefully I do still come back to thinking about
yeah,
what it's
yeah.
like for other people,
Yeah.
you know.
I saw you talking about policy because you always bring both balances. Like because it's quite hard to, so it's like leaning either too much of a policy or then too much of the community. So
Yeah.
sometimes then you kind of have to bring both to have the balance. Is a form of art, honestly.
Yeah, I guess it's, you're always weaving
Yeah.
weaving a way through. I think in some of that too, initially I learnt by making lots of mistakes.
Yeah.
So I got into
Mm.
being sort of a manager quite young,
Mm.
sort of in my late 20s. And I look back now and think, well, I wouldn't like to be managed by 27-year-old me, but I learnt from some of those mistakes.
Yeah.
And then I also, yeah, I've worked for some terrible managers
Mm.
and I've thought, yeah, if I ever get to manage people again, I'm not going to do that,
Mm.
So I kind of learnt by that. And then eventually, after I was working in Parliament, I decided I wanted to get back into non-government organisations, and be closer to the community. I also knew that I'm better at being the leader and the manager than I am the doer.
Mm.
Yeah. And so I decided that, yeah, so I tried to get more senior roles in NGOs and I think back then, which was, 30 years ago, maybe, if you were seen as, a policy person only, then you were seen as a policy person,
Exactly.
So I found it really hard to get the roles I wanted. Eventually I went and did an MBA,
Mm.
which initially I kind of thought, oh, I'm only doing this to get the 3 letters after my name so I can get the job I want, But actually I got into it and I really enjoyed it.
Wow.
And I found it a really interesting intellectual challenge. I liked the thinking. I liked the tools that
Yeah.
they taught me. So I think I've sort of brought all of that together,
Wow.
and then of course with the Mental Health Foundation,
Mm.
it also marries up with my own bipolar and my
Mm.
experience of bipolar. So hopefully, that's a reasonably good combination.
I think also bring people hope as well. I mean, a lot of people who, even though the stigma is lesser, but I mean, the challenge, even when I reflect back when I was working at mental health
Yeah,
foundations, the Like My campaign, equally, there was these perceptions about when people being diagnosed, how do they have such a high, like demanding job?
yeah,
That's always, and then with someone like yourself,
yeah.
like having a knowledge that just give people hope. Honestly, that's what I see and how I see as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, I think I've had that sort of feedback from a range of people.
Mm.
And yeah, it's interesting because I think my biggest fear
Mm.
around having bipolar,
Mm.
because eventually I
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
gravitated into being chief executive of
Yeah.
NGOs. So I've done that
Mm.
probably about 4 or 5 times
Mm.
now. And my biggest fear once I knew that I had bipolar was that the stigma around that
Mm.
was going to undermine people's confidence
Exactly.
in me.
Yeah.
Uh, and
It was a real issue at the time.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, even
It was,
can be
yeah,
now,
I agree.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've come a long way on stigma, but there's a hell of a long
Yes,
way to
still.
go. And even when I got the job as the chief executive of the Mental Health Foundation, I hadn't told the board that I had bipolar. I said I
Mm.
have my own
Mm.
challenges with my mental health. And
Mm.
then I was not 100% confident that if I said
Mm.
I have bipolar, that they would give me the job. So
Mm.
once I had the job, And I was kind of sitting down having a coffee with the chair, and I said, well, look, I need to tell you fully what my own mental health issues are. And told him I had bipolar, and I said, well, I hope that's not going to be a problem. And he said, if that was going to be a problem, I think we'd have bigger problems.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm so pleased to hear it because I know
Yeah.
your concern is genuine.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Still now, a lot of people still,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for
I've had
sharing that.
some horrible reactions from people who should know a lot better,
Yeah. I agree.
basically. But, and look, it is part of me, like I sometimes have to challenge myself and, I can't pretend that my bipolar is not part of me as the chief executive of the Mental Health Foundation. There are times I get really excited about things, and probably get a little bit hypermanic about what we can do, I still go through times of being depressed, probably 2 or 3 times a year. It's actually getting better, Ivan. I'm learning all the time how to manage my bipolar, which is good.
I think that is so valuable hearing you saying it because that is a big challenge. Even like my depressions have never go away.
Yeah.
Now I just better at carrying.
Yes, absolutely.
It have never gone away. It's almost like sleeping with me all the time.
Yeah.
So I absolutely get what you say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the reasons I love my job at the Mental Health Foundation is I absolutely believe in what we're promoting and what we're preaching because I apply it to myself all the time.
Yeah.
And I know that it works,
Yes.
I also know, so that's, the behavior stuff, the sort of lifestyle stuff that I have to apply, the attitude stuff.
The 5 way of
5 ways to well-being and all the skills and things that, that I've learned and that we're trying to sort of get out into the community during Mental Health Awareness Week. But also what I've reflected on is also my privilege as a white baby boomer, middle class, heterosexual, cisgendered, Caucasian man. Everything else in the system is set up for me to succeed. Bipolar was really the only thing that was there to trip me up. It makes me also very passionate about the kind of advocacy and social justice and policy side of it. Like I was doing an interview this morning and one of the interviewers was talking about the number of people sleeping rough, and there was also an article or a thing on the news where the Business Association is complaining about people sleeping rough and how bad it is for business. I just said, yeah, look, the other part of me, yes, this is all the sort of things I do when I see someone that's, egging or sleeping rough. I also, a big part of mental health is social justice. I often say to people, if you didn't have a mental health problem before you had to sleep on the street, you're sure as hell going to have one after about 3 nights. It's, the fact that it still kind of fires me up with, I get pretty hoo-ha about like businesses going, just clear these people away, they're bad for business. It's like, rather than going, why do they have to be there? What's causing this?
I don't want to grow and say, I'm going to sleep on the street.
No,
it's fun.
Yeah, no.
Don't want to do it in the first place.
No, that's right. No, absolutely. It also gives me that sort of fire in the belly about that because I remember when I was in denial about, my mental health. I was very self-stigma about it for a long, long time. And in the end, my bipolar was cycling faster and faster. And, and so I was self-medicating a lot with alcohol and with sleeping pills because insomnia was a big part of it. But of course, that's a really wicked combination because I had blackouts and all kinds of crazy and stupid things. Because I was drunk and out of it on sleeping pills. And eventually the health system sort of caught up with me and my GP kind of said, well, I'll keep prescribing you sleeping pills, but you have to go see a specialist. So kind of got a note to have to go to the headmaster's office kind of thing. And so I went my first specialist appointment down in Wellington. I remember it very acutely. I walked into the waiting room and every other person in that room was either Māori or Pacifica. And every other person there looked like they'd had a really hard life. They, I'm sure, were at least half of them were sleeping on the street. They just really, and my first thought was, you haven't got a chance. The whole, I had enough education, I might have bipolar, I might have had all these things, but I was always able to earn a living. I was always had a house to live in. I didn't face racism and all of those things. I didn't come from a family where, I might have been neglected or abused or any of those things. And the health system itself, I remember also, I could figure out what was going on. I could figure out that, for example, that the doctor I was seeing was just a house surgeon and the real psychiatrist was behind that two-way mirror over there, and so, I could sort of figure it all out. But that was because, I guess, of my privilege, So it really struck me and I think sort of all of those experiences, landing in the role of the chief executive of the Mental Health Foundation, it's kind of like, it's almost like everything that happened in my life and all the skills I acquired, all the life experiences sort of have come together for this. So it's been, I've been there for 9 years now, and it's been both the most challenging and the most rewarding role that I've ever had, really.
I felt like even working for any job, because of my depression, I always felt like I had to prove more to other people what I'm capable of, and even work harder sometimes. Even no one actually say that I need to.
Yeah.
But it's just that, like self-stigma,
Sure.
Yeah. So, and at time I also feel like because of how I need to uh, manage my own mental health means that I had to do more about my mental health, including, like doing Muay Thai, yoga, and have a very stable like routine and eat healthy, so that I can actually on top or the threshold of normal people.
Yeah. I think I have a belief. I believe in myself. I absolutely believe in myself, and so I've never had this kind of thing that I have to prove that I'm good enough, because I've got bipolar. One thing that came to my mind when you were talking is, when I'm depressed, I feel like everybody can tell, and I lose my inner confidence. Like I'm pretty confident most of the time, but when I'm depressed, I lose that confidence, kind of like, I feel quite unsure of myself. So, I mean, I'm very lucky, again, working in the Mental Health Foundation. I will just say I'm feeling depressed at the moment, and I'll ask my colleagues and say, am I coming across okay? Am I, and usually they go, oh, you're no different to what you normally are. But my perception of myself is that I'm very, very different.
Wouldn't it be nice, like every workplace just like that?
It would be amazing. Yeah, no, it would be amazing. And because I think one of the most powerful things for me is kind of what a friend talked about, is radical acceptance. It's like when you said you hold your depression better now. I think I really get that, because when I start to feel depressed, I remember when I was younger and depression would start to happen. I really understand why people call it the black dog, because it just does feel like there's some monster over your shoulder coming for you, like some dark shadow coming for you.
And you can't shake it away. It's not like you can just shake it.
No, you can't. But but you want to run.
That's right.
I certainly did. I was always like, no, and so I spent a lot of years running from those really bad feelings, like running to alcohol or to pills or whatever. And now, and also not telling people, because my internal voice was, you should be able to sort this out. You should be able to sort this out yourself, And now when I start to feel depression coming on, I know a lot more about it. Like I know that it's my body chemistry getting out of whack. I liken it when I'm talking to people who maybe don't experience depression. I liken it to like when you first turn off a fridge and you feel it, you can hear it going, starting to power down. That's how I start. That's what now I notice the sort of the first, and it's like, oh, shit,
it's coming.
It's coming. I'm powering down.
Yeah.
Something's not right. Yeah, I still go, I don't want this, and who wants it? It's like, who wants to sleep on the street? Nobody.
Your inconvenience, like,
Yeah, this is very inconvenient for me. I'm on holiday. I'm supposed to be having a happy time, and you decide to turn up now. Yeah. I didn't invite you.
Exactly.
But yeah, now I sort of go, oh, well, I almost literally go, hello, depression, and it's like, been here before, I know what to do. And, I know also that you're going to last, 5 to 10 days. The best thing I can do is just accept that and double down on the things that I know will sort of help to keep me healthy or restore my health. And so I make sure I've been taking my medication properly. I really make sure that I'm, eating healthily. I try to make sure I'm sleeping and then I also do the things like, make sure I have some social contact every day, even if I don't, and it's not about whether I feel like it or not. Sometimes it's the last thing I want to do, and make sure I go for a walk, make sure I spend some time. I can remember doing some gardening and I was deadheading the lavenders and I was thinking, man, I feel stink. I really feel terrible, but I know this is good for me. And just do all those things. And then over a period of, like I say, 5 to 10 days, it's like the power outage is over. And then at a certain point, I can sort of feel it go, and it's body chemistry just sort of coming back into balance.
Honestly, thank you so much for being so honest, because I can so resonate to what you say. Like, I wake up at 4 o'clock, still I go to yoga at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Do I want to wake up at 4? No.
Oh, yeah.
Do I want to, have a late night? Yes.
Yeah.
But because I know it do good for my mental health.
Yeah.
That's why I do it. Sometimes I felt like, because you have that awareness means that you know even how important it is to do it and make sure that.
Well, it's a very big incentive because being depressed. So like, I barely drink alcohol now. And that's something that's sort of, over the last sort of 3 years, I've almost cut it out completely.
Wow.
I'm not sort of religious about it, but, that's one thing. And it wasn't hard for me to do that because if I drink, if I can have one beer, maybe. If I have 2 beers, I won't sleep that night, and then that will affect my mental health for days. And so it is just not worth it. And so, it's not hard for me because the alternative is so bad, and I've also learnt some things like I quite often used to get depressed when I went on holiday, which was just such a bummer. But I've learnt that I think that is related to sometimes it was related to alcohol because I was drinking more alcohol when I was on holiday. But I think another big part of it was dopamine withdrawals. Dopamine's the reward hormone. And when I'm in a sort of quite high stress job, achievement, so getting lots of dopamine hits. And then when I go on a holiday, it's kind of like the body's going, what's happening? Where's all this? And in fact, what I understand is that your body actually then goes, oh, you got too much dopamine floating around, so we need to cut it back. And then it cuts it back too far. So I've learned a few. One of the techniques I've learned is you need to kind of put your body under healthy stress, and then your body will produce more dopamine because it balances it out. So one of the things I do is I do fasting when I go on holiday. That seems to help. So yeah, lots of learning all the
Yes.
time,
Yeah.
and I think we're in a wonderful age of learning about mental health
Mm,
and learning about the brain, learning
mm.
about body chemistry.
And accessible information
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Mental Health Foundation, of course.
I mean, I didn't really know much about the 5 ways to wellbeing till I came to the Mental Health
Mm,
Foundation. They're so easy to understand. When I first saw the little, the sticker that you put on the fridge, I thought,
yes.
oh my goodness, that's
Yeah.
just so good,
Yes. Yeah.
And then I thought, man, I wish I'd known this when I was 16,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do try to impart it to my children. But of course, my next thought was, yeah, but I wouldn't have listened. So there's a real
Yeah.
challenge to sort of
Yeah.
try and get that wisdom across to young people.
Yes.
But yeah, it really works,
Yeah.
So I guess for me, yeah, bringing all of that into what I do it makes it super meaningful, and
And I can agree with what you say, as quite often is we've been doing a lot of things that are included in that 5 way, but having a way to name it is
yeah,
me consciously knowing what I've been doing is working for, and how
yeah,
can I add a little bit more?
yeah,
I'm missing something here,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that naming itself is so powerful, and that's why it has been running so successfully so many.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean,
Yeah,
I keep the 5 ways sticker on my fridge,
yeah,
if I'm just starting to feel a little bit off, but not
yes,
quite, sort of
mm,
I think, well, what haven't I been doing? What do I need to do that I haven't, which
yeah.
of those 5 ways have I not been paying attention to?
Exactly. And also, I just want to say thank you so much for being so candid about your experience. I think there's still this, I think for many people, even in society in general, especially those who have never experienced mental health issue, I don't think people still truly and fully understand anxiety, depression, because I went through a period in my early day, how I managed my anxiety when I was in New Zealand, which is
Mm,
I use alcohol as well.
mm,
I wasn't know I was having anxiety,
mm, mm.
and that was the big thing. And even 3 years ago, when I being diagnosed with ADHD, and suddenly I realized that why I easily feel overwhelmed, too much stimulation,
Mm.
I just feel drained,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and now I know how to have both a balance out. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so having said all that, but without people understanding and able to be honest with my experience and not being supported, what that means is then part of me have to be hidden as well.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then that became an issue, like, then I become worried about what happened if I'm not able to perform,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
or functions.
yeah, yeah,
And I just had to hide everything away.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, look, I talk about having bipolar on national
Mm,
television. I was on
mm,
breakfast television. I said it again
mm.
this morning, but there's still situations and settings where, not that I hide it, but I'm not going to talk about it a
I
lot
agree.
because
Yeah.
a lot of people still, my own theory about why people get,
Mm,
discriminate against people or have a lot of stigma around mental health or make stupid jokes around it or whatever silly things they do is actually that everybody does have mental health
I
and
agree.
everybody has times when they're challenged
Yes.
around their mental health,
Yeah.
and it scares the
Yeah.
crap out of people to hear of someone who's got ongoing issues because they think, is that me? Is
Yeah.
that really what's going on for
Yes.
me? My goodness,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
are terrified of their own mental health,
Yeah.
both, particularly of the notion that because everybody has difficult thoughts and feelings,
Yeah.
and people are really scared of what does that
Yeah.
mean. And if they meet people
I
like you
agree.
and me who go, well, I've got an illness, ta-da,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, shit, I might
Yeah.
have an illness as well,
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
one way of dealing with that is to push it away
Mm,
and say, no, it's other people. It's you're different and something wrong with you,
mm,
and it's not me. It's,
mm.
it's other people. So yeah. So no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I do find in my work, I still, because I have to make difficult
Yeah.
decisions, like I've had
Absolutely.
to make, unfortunately, I've had to make people redundant at different times,
Mm,
or say, we're not going to do that. I don't, I know you want to do it, but that's not a choice this organization is going to make. We're going to do something different. And, you're not always as a leader making decisions that are popular, or that everybody likes.
And that's the toughest things being the leader, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. But it's also my biggest worry is that then, well, it's not my biggest worry, but I suppose, yeah, to be honest, I've never had it happen at a mental health foundation, which is really good, but that people will go, oh, he's only making that decision because he's not well, or, that's not a wise decision because he's, not well. And if I'm honest with you, Ivan, there are times when I ask myself that question. I kind of, as I said earlier, like I can't say that having bipolar doesn't influence me as a leader, and I think there have been times when because yes, I get depressed. I also have times, not when I'm hypermanic anymore, but I can notice there are times when I get very enthusiastic about stuff, and I have to question myself sometimes and go, okay, are you thinking that through properly, or is this a part of your bipolar enthusiasm, But yeah, so I ask myself those questions, but I'm also and I actually think it's good if people do ask me those, but there's a way of asking that is genuine and uplifting and is just genuinely questioning and testing. And there's a way of asking that is undermining and putting you down and kind of diminishing me as a person, And I'm lucky that I don't think that's happened very often. I did have I did have one story which would stay with me forever, which is, of course, in my role, I sometimes go into the media and, have to, criticize things that are happening in the world and from a mental health perspective. And I was at a conference where there was a public sector chief executive was in this session. It was a session on mental health, and I was one of the speakers. And so, as I usually do when I'm speaking, I said, well, if I have bipolar, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, afterwards, this guy came up to me and he said, so that time you criticized us in the media, you must have forgotten to take your pills that day.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh. I know. And he's still a chief executive in the public sector, this person.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. So it's alive and well out there, stigma, and that's just not stigma. That's actually just mean bullying behavior. That's just being,
it's not
quite frankly, it's being an asshole.
And it's not mala enhancing at all.
No, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it's not, again, like if no one can criticize the government, and then why we have a democratic system in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
The whole, I mean, especially coming from New Zealand, that's what I value the most is you can genuinely reflect what is going on. Just because someone don't like to hear it, it doesn't give them a permissions to use mental health issue as an admissions to target someone else.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I would have had no problem if this guy had said, you really didn't understand what you were talking about when you criticized this, or, I was really angry when you criticized what my department was doing. I wouldn't have had a problem with that, but using my mental health as a weapon to try and put me down and make me feel bad as a way to sort of, as revenge for having criticized something that his organization was doing, that was low. That was really low. Sadly, speaks volumes about him as a person, I think. But so those things are real.
And honestly, that's why it make me respect and admire you even more, because that's what the authentic leadership is about.
Yeah.
Like showing up in the world inside out and walking your talk, even though someone might face a lot of challenges. It's never easy, to be honest. Like I don't want people to think just because someone is CEO or whatever means that they don't have feelings. They're still human beings.
Oh yeah.
We all still go to bed at night.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like want to love the people that we love. But quite often when people are in a higher positions, you know, like just because of environment, it doesn't mean that that person then immune from any challenge.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. No,
Yeah.
I mean that I was in classic victim response straight
Mm,
away. Like I should have said, that's a really, really disgusting thing to say, but I was so
absolutely.
shocked.
Yeah.
I just kind of
Uh,
said nothing,
yeah. Yeah.
and I did confront him about it about 6 months later because it
Mm,
just kind of ate away at me, but he just tried to slip and slide out of it, and I
wow.
thought, I'm not going to bother. I think one of the things about, I was thinking, because, your podcast described as authentic leadership, and so I was thinking, well, what does that mean, as I was thinking about coming here. And I think one of the things is actually being prepared to lead, being prepared to make decisions, to say, we're going to go, I think we should go that way, not that way, and recognize that I'm going to make some mistakes sometimes. Maybe it should have been that way and not quite that way. But if you are terrified of making mistakes, then you're never going to make any decision. So it's kind of like, form of courage, but it's also being prepared to do that. And for me, that's authentic because I see those things. I think, no, I think that's where we should be going. And if I don't kind of feel like, I feel a responsibility to say that, but I also feel like I say, I've worked for other people where I've thought, man, I don't like what's happening here. I don't like the way this is being done. And I could see it could be done really differently. So I guess for me, I need to be that person who, I wouldn't say is in control, but at least has the ability to sort of say, no, I think we should go that way. I try very hard to listen to everybody else because I don't feel like I'm right all the time. And also another thing I say, Ivan, is I don't think I've ever had an original idea in my life. I just think I'm good at synthesizing other people's ideas and then going, oh, this is how we should use them. Go that way. Yeah. And that's another thing I think it's important as a leader is to question myself quite often and kind of go, okay, am I just getting into my way or the highway or, or what? But not tie myself up in knots about that too, like if I'm afraid to make mistakes or I'm afraid to annoy people who disagree with me, or I'm so afraid that I'm getting too powerful that I won't actually make decisions, then I can't be a good leader.
And that again, you know, like you are so reflective on your own practices and also your life. And also what that means is, you know, like there's this constant juggling between what is true in you and how do you balance with the expectation of other people as well. And all that is not as simple as my thoughts.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No, you're right. And I do think self-reflection is probably one of the most important things in a leader or in any person, actually. I think the ability to reflect on yourself and see yourself as honestly as you can, super important. I mean, if you're a leader, you're given power. I have more ability to make decisions than other people at the Mental Health Foundation. So I have that power. And sometimes people go, power's a terrible thing, well, not necessarily.
No, sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. It's to acknowledge that you have the power,
yeah,
but not abusing the
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And part of the responsibility of being given power, authority, whatever you want to call it, is to reflect, to take time to reflect and, to acknowledge when you get things wrong. So I, quite often I will say in a staff meeting, I apologize for that. I got that wrong, or I didn't do that as well as I could have done it,
Yeah.
Um, I recently had a performance appraisal, and it sounded all very formal, but I recently, had my annual appraisal from the board, and part of that is to sort of do your own self-appraisal. And so I said, well, here's the things I think I got wrong in the last year, and they basically said, I also said, "Oh, and here's
Mm,
the things I think I got right,"
mm,
but they basically said, "Yep, pretty much we think you got those things wrong too, but
mm,
we also think you got those things right."
mm,
So
mm,
I guess I'm saying that because that was reassuring that I guess that I'm prepared to be honest.
mm,
And to me, it does build a trust relationship with everybody. The
mm,
board is my boss. They trust me more because I'm prepared to say, no, I got that wrong. I hope, and I think many of the staff trust me more because I'm prepared to say, I got these things wrong
mm,
without going into, kind of, and I still go, yeah, but I still get these things right.
mm.
It's about that balance and that
Yeah,
reflection. Yeah.
yeah,
It's confidence with humility at the
yeah.
same time.
And again, like I don't think anyone will be always right. That would be scary, isn't it? Almost like you can predict the future.
Well, yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then also is to have the courage
Mm,
to be vulnerable and say, maybe I could have done a better job.
yeah.
That come back to courage as well, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Recognizing that I'm fully human,
Mm.
with, and as I've got older and older and older, which I am getting older and older and
You
older.
don't look 63,
Oh,
let you
oh,
know.
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. I wouldn't have even thought about that. I thought it would be probably about 58 or something.
Oh, well, that's good. 5 years. That's what I'm aiming for. 5 years younger.
Mm.
Yeah, I think, I know myself more and more and more as I get older. And, it is actually one of the one of the gifts that mental illness gives you
Mm.
is if you are able to start to manage and hold your mental health better, you learn a lot about
Yeah.
yourself. You learn more about yourself.
Mm.
And, hopefully that makes me a better parent, friend, partner, and leader. I think I accept a lot of things about myself that I probably didn't, when I was younger. And, I sort of was saying that I have at times reflect on what is my bipolar and where did it all come from. And, yes, I'm sure some of it is biological, but I also think quite a lot of it came from that incredible stress about sort of like, who am I? Where do I fit? Am I good enough? I've got my parents' morals. I've got this kind of political ideology about changing the world. And then I've got these personal desires and wants that at times are in conflict with this. And it's just like this big mesh. And I'm a man, but I don't like the role models of being men that I see. And it's like
Yeah.
a lot of pressures, a
Yeah.
lot of
Mm.
stresses, and a lot of,
And they're all real as
oh, they're very real. That sense of, because of that, also always feeling a bit of an outsider. And I think everybody wants to actually, and I certainly did,
Mm.
so I should speak about me.
Mm.
I felt like an outsider, but I really wanted to be accepted. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
there's a lot
I
of
get it.
stress
Yeah.
that goes with that
Yeah.
as well. So I think getting older, I now just accept a lot of who I am. I don't feel as stressed about needing to be this or needing to be that, or how do I fit,
Mm.
or do I fit in, or don't I fit in? Am I attractive? Am I not attractive? Am I intelligent? Am I
Mm.
not intelligent? Do I believe this? Do I believe that? It's no, I'm just me. I'm just this, this mashup of all these life experiences. Some of them are terrible and
Yeah.
awful, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't repeat them, and others are really good. And I've learned from all of them, and I just kind of accept this is just me now. This is who I am. Yeah. And that takes a lot of stress.
I think that's so beautiful because you're saying, like initially you feel there's so many part of you, which one is you, but then you realize that they all are you.
And I look at my children,
Yeah.
and that's what I wish for them,
Mm.
that in as they go in that along their life, and sooner than me, hopefully. I hope
Mm.
they get there earlier than I have in my life, that they can just kind of accept and love themselves, and which I think they do, but even more, I think as young people, there's so many questions, so many challenges, and so much uncertainty about themselves
Yeah.
and about their
Yes.
future. And yeah, I just really wish for everybody that they are able to just accept who they are,
Mm.
really.
I,
I
I'm
think
with
that's the
you.
core of mental wellness,
I'm with you.
whether you have things that challenge your physical or mental health or whatever, just accepting who you are. Sounds trite, but it is very true.
Oh, and it sounds easy, but actually it's the hardest.
Totally
actually.
it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and there's
yeah,
still days when I wake up and
yeah.
don't like things about myself for sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sean, I just want to say first, I couldn't even thank you enough first to come here. And second is, wow, your story is just so inspiring. Even for myself to be sitting here and hearing it, I can so resonate for so many things you say. And I think what you say, it will make such a big impact from people who feel that they're not being seen and heard and know that they are not alone. For
uh,
that, you really are authentically.
when I came into this role, I had to kind of like open the cupboard and look at a lot of experiences from when I was very unwell, that I'd kind of closed that cupboard door and didn't really want to go there very often. And I had to sort of open that up and sort of explore my bipolar, explore my suicidal feelings and
Wow.
all of those kinds of things.
Wow.
And where I got to after a couple of years was just this incredible. Um, I kind of almost, it's hard to put it into words. It's almost this awe or, uh, you know, deep sense of kind of gratitude or surprise that those times, which were so awful, those experiences which were just really horrible that nearly ended my life, despite my privilege and everything, I can now use those to do something positive in the world. Far out. That's pretty incredible. So
Yes. Wow.
thank you, universe, for that one.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I tell you what, that's what Franklin say about men searching for meaning in his book. Like we
yeah,
don't know why we suffer, but only when we look back we realize why we suffer.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, and that gives people hope.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I never realized, when I came to the Mental Health
Mm.
Foundation, and it's not really in my job description or anything like that, but every now and then someone will message me and say, I heard you speak. I live with bipolar, or my son has bipolar, or I experienced depression, and it was great to hear you talk.
I
And it's like,
I agree. That's what I felt as well. Because I believe many high achiever also experience some form of mental health challenges.
mm,
Many willing to step up and
yep.
say because that would normalize and give people hope.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. No,
yeah.
well, yeah. As I say, it's a great thing. It's a lovely thing that comes back to me. So that's all part of the cosmic gift of it all. And look, same to you, Ivan. I really admire what you're doing. I still need and admire and get heaps out of other people who are prepared to talk about their mental health journey. I learn from that all the time. I learn from you. So yeah, ka pai, mate.
Thank you so much. I'm so privileged to honestly hear your story and thank you for trusting me.